Just 2 days ago, yes, 2 days, Prince Harry did something that the so-called grown-ups in the room have been avoiding for years. He spoke plainly, firmly and respectfully about veterans, not behind palace walls, not through anonymous briefings, not via whispered sources. He spoke publicly as a man who has served, as someone who has been there, and as someone who understands the real cost of war. And the internet reacted immediately. Not with confusion, not with indifference, but with recognition, because people could feel it. This wasn't a polished PR statement, this wasn't damage control, this wasn't an image repair exercise, this was instinctive, this was personal. This was Prince Harry being exactly who he has always been, a soldier first, a royal second, and a human being always. Within hours, his words were everywhere, shared, reposted, quoted, discussed across platforms, people from different political views, different countries, and even people who openly admit they don't like Harry still paused and said, "You know what? He's right." And that reaction alone tells you everything you need to know. Because when something cuts through the noise like that, it's not about popularity, it's about authenticity. Prince Harry didn't insert himself into the conversation. He belongs in it. He earned his place there years ago, not by birthright, but by service. He trained, he deployed, he lived among soldiers, he lost friends. He came home carrying the same invisible weight that so many veterans carry quietly every day. And that's the part people keep forgetting or pretending not to understand. Harry is not talking about veterans. He is talking as one. That's why this moment mattered so much. Donald Trump's remarks about NATO, suggesting that allies stayed off the front lines in Afghanistan and implying the United States never needed them, didn't just offend diplomats. They erased lived experiences. They minimized sacrifice. They rewrote history in a way that insulted thousands of families who paid the ultimate price. And while many people were outraged privately, only one prominent figure with direct military experience spoke publicly and clearly. Prince Harry, not the king, not the future king, not the men who wear medals they didn't earn in combat. Not the men who claim to represent service while remaining silent when service is disrespected. Harry spoke, and he didn't shout, he didn't posture. He didn't attack. He did something far more powerful. He told the truth. He reminded the world that in 2001, NATO invoked Article 5 for the first and only time in its history. That every allied nation stood with the United States. That this wasn't symbolic support, it was boots on the ground. Blood, loss, lives permanently altered. He spoke about serving in Afghanistan, about making lifelong friends, about losing them. And when Harry talks about loss, it doesn't feel abstract. It feels lived in, because it is. He named the number 457 British service personnel killed. He acknowledged the ripple effect, parents burying children, children growing up without parents, families carrying grief long after the headlines moved on. That level of specificity matters, because vague praise is cheap. Details are what honour sacrifice. And then he said something that should have ended the conversation entirely. Those sacrifices deserve to be spoken about truthfully and with respect. That's it. That was the crime. That was the controversy. Telling the truth respectfully. And the response? Applause. Massive applause. Veterans spoke up. Families spoke up. Ordinary people said, "Finally, someone said it." Harry didn't need to go viral. But he did, because the truth still has power. And that's when the UK media lost its mind. Instead of acknowledging Harry's service, instead of recognising the dignity of his response, Instead of saying, "This is a veteran defending veterans," certain outlets went straight to the gutter. Can we deport Harry? Should Harry be silenced? How dare he speak? Deport him where? The battlefield he served on? This is the man who fought for the same country these tabloids claim to defend. The man who put his body in harm's way. The man who has done more for veterans than most of the people criticising him ever will. And yet somehow he's the problem. Meanwhile, absolute silence from the palace. Let's pause here, because this matters. Prince Harry is no longer a working royal. He holds no official power. He has been stripped of military titles that once recognised his service. He has every excuse not to speak. And yet he did. Meanwhile, the king, who styles himself as a unifying figure, said nothing. The future king, who claims to care deeply about the armed forces, said nothing. No statements, no acknowledgement, no defence of British troops, nothing. And then, like clockwork, Trump issued a follow-up statement praising British soldiers, acknowledging their bravery and reaffirming the bond between the US and the UK. A clear backtrack. And this is where the UK media performed one of its most shameless sleights of hand. Suddenly, front pages declared that Trump backed down after concern by the king. Concern expressed where, when, how. Because Charles did not release a statement. He did not address veterans. He did not publicly correct the record. He did not acknowledge the insult. We're told by sources that he made a private call. Sources. The same imaginary figures that appear whenever the narrative needs patching. And here's the question no one in the mainstream press wants to answer. Why would a private, unseen, unverified conversation matter more than a public statement that dominated global discourse? The answer is simple: it wouldn't. What actually happened is far more uncomfortable for the establishment to admit. Prince Harry's words created pressure. Public reaction created accountability. Veterans' voices amplified the truth. And Trump responded. But acknowledging that would mean admitting that Harry still holds moral authority, that he still commands respect, that his voice still matters perhaps more than those wearing crowns. And that idea terrifies the system. So instead, credit was redirected upward. Silence was reframed as influence. Inaction was repackaged as leadership. And the internet said, no, people weren't fooled. Veterans weren't fooled. Comment sections exploded. How does silence help soldiers? Where is the king's statement? Why is Harry being erased again? And then came the sarcasm, the humour, the blunt honesty. Good King Harry spoke up. Charlie Boy stayed silent. A royal source told a palace source who told a tabloid, give us a break. People saw exactly what was happening. This wasn't about Trump. This wasn't about NATO. This was about control of the narrative. Prince Harry acted independently, guided by conscience, not hierarchy. And that is unforgivable to institutions built on obedience. The irony is staggering. The man painted as irresponsible showed responsibility. The man accused of being self-interested acted selflessly. The man labelled divisive unified veterans across borders. And the men praised as statesmen said nothing. Let's talk about Invictus for a moment, because context matters. The Invictus Games did not become massive because of royal branding. They became massive because veterans felt seen, because Harry showed up, because he listened, because he didn't treat service as a costume or a talking point. Even when the games were held abroad, Harry made time for Team UK. He interacted, he supported, he uplifted, and where were the others? No well-wishes, no visible support, no acknowledgement. But somehow Harry is still framed as the one who doesn't care. It's insulting not just to him, but to every veteran who knows better. And that's why this moment resonated so deeply. Because veterans recognize their own. They recognize sincerity. They recognize someone who understands the unspoken weight of service. Harry didn't have to remind people that he served. But when he did, it wasn't a boast. It was context. I was there. I lost friends. Those words carry authority you cannot manufacture. And that's why, love him or hate him, people listened. The UK media can spin until it collapses under its own contradictions. But reality has a way of surfacing. Prince Harry spoke. Veterans responded. The public noticed. And the narrative shifted, even if certain outlets refused to admit it. So when people ask, why does Harry still matter? This is why. Because leadership isn't about titles. Respect isn't about inheritance. And service isn't something you can fake. Say what you want about Prince Harry, but when it comes to veterans, he shows up. He listens, he speaks, and he refuses to let their sacrifices be rewritten or minimized. That's not rebellion. That's honor. And that's why, despite everything thrown at him, people still stand with him. So now I'll ask you, what do you think? Was this about palace diplomacy or public truth? Was silence leadership or avoidance? And who actually stood up for veterans when it mattered? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you found value in this discussion, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who still believes silence equals strength. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.